A quota of Russia's annual shell production is gone in 3 days. News from Russia and Ukraine. This is what we will talk about today. Main topics of this video. Russian RS-28 Sarmat missile exploded in a silo. 3 arsenals has been destroyed in Russia. In Kamennoye, which is near Tikhoretsk, 23rd arsenal, and another one in Toropets, which was a bit earlier. Russia continues to kill civilians in Ukraine. News from the front in Kursk region, Russia, and in Ukraine. How things are going in the Russian economy. The burned-out base of the former Wagner PMC. The wives of Russian mobilized soldiers has been detained. This is what we will talk about today. Hello there, I'm Elena. Welcome back to my channel Enough of Propaganda. Let's make truth available for everyone. Sorry I've been away on a trip in the mountains for a while, and I missed you guys and girls. Did you miss me? Anyways, let's get back to the war in Ukraine and in Russia, and let's see what is happening. Let's start from Russian Sarmat. Remember that Sarmat Mobile, which says to Washington, return the task to hit basically United States. It's RS-28 Sarmat. Russia failed again. Nuclear ICBM RS-28 Sarmat reportedly explodes during Russian test. According to analyst M.T. Anderson, Sarmat missile exploded in its silo at the Plesetsk test range in the Arkhangelsk region of Russia, leaving a massive crater and destroying the facility. He's not the only one analyst who reported on that, and I'll just show you what Michael Naki also providing on his channel in a minute. This is reportedly the 4th failed test of the Sarmat. The first and only successful test occurred on April 20th, 2022. This footage Michael Naki showed on his channel, this is the footage before and after. So when you see the both, you can kind of understand what happened, like big crater, the whole facility destroyed. This is shown on Twitter of Jake Bro. He says, just so everyone knows, ICBM test launches do not have real nuclear weapons on board. They have dummy warheads that take data and simulate an attack with a nuclear weapon on intended target. The only explosion that occurred was from the propellant in the missile. This video is shown on Jake Bro channel, is so-called successful test launches, previous launch. And we have no clue, as he says, if any were accurate and so on, that it was even in fact successful launch and stuff like that. And my personal research on the Russian nuclear facilities and how the ammunition and Russian nukes stored is showing, and I have video about this, about Russian corruption, that it's stored terribly, basically in horrible conditions, and I keep telling Russians that it's stupid to do saber rattling in the nuclear sphere and so on, because if Putin will ever push the nuclear button, it's highly likely that it will blow up right inside Russia, because it's stored terribly, kind of like tanks. If they can't even store tanks, half of them can't move, another half of them can't shoot. What do you think is happening with nuclear weapons? The same basically thing. They not stored properly, and the failure of Sarmat launches proving that again and again. I told you so. On the other hand, American weapons proved themselves performing great in the war in Ukraine, and this is a good video on United 24 showing how American weapons are making a huge difference during the war in Ukraine. Now let's talk about 3 arsenals or ammunition storages were blown up in Russia in the last days. This is the post from Anton Gerashchenko. Ukrainian General Staff confirms strikes on 2 military arsenals of the Russian armed forces. Tikhoretsk arsenal is one of the 3 largest ammunition storage based on the occupiers and one of the key ones in the logistics system of the Russian troops. According to the available information, at the time of the attack, an echelon was present, or a train basically, was present on the territory of the arsenal, which delivered at least 2,000 tons of ammunition, including from the North Korea. The Polylet radar station, which detected air targets in the direction of the arsenal, was also attacked. This is on the photo. And security services of Ukraine struck this 23rd arsenal on the main artillery department of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, near the settlements of Oktyabrsky, Tver region. Fire and detonations are recorded in areas of both military arsenals. This is a bit of a footage. This is the Podlet radar station. These are the first shots from the satellite on the fires in Kamennoye in Tikhoretsk region, how it blowing up. Brady Afrik published it, and Michael Naki posted it on his in his video. The detonation was so hard that pieces and some of the shells flew as far as 5 to 10 kilometers. This guy is filming one of them about 10 kilometers from the epicenter. The hub in Tikhoretsk, the arsenal in Tikhoretsk, was storing the ammunition from North Korea, according to White House and some American information. I have lived in the Krasnodar region, and Tikhoretsk is one of the main hubs, but this is explosion in Tikhoretsk region in Kamennoye. It's not like in Tikhoretsk itself, but very impressive. The second blow up was near Toropets again, and this was first they blew up recently 107th Arsenal GRAU, and then 23rd Arsenal GRAU. This is the second hit we're talking about. And again, lots of ammunition were destroyed. So the first attack on Russian arsenals, and the huge one, if not the biggest one, was on September 18th. And according to Mr. Gerashenko, there are reports that Grad, S-300 and S-400 missiles, ballistic Iskander missiles, and a small stash of North Korean missiles were stored in the ammunition warehouse in Toropets, Tver region of Russia. And fires on the whole territory of the 107 Russian arsenal. This is footage from 2018 from TV channel Zvezda, or Star, Russian military TV channel, which provided by Current Time News. This is deputy of the Minister of Defense, Dmitry Bulgakov. He was deputy at the time. So now he's under the investigation for corruption. And they were saying it's a state-of-the-art, that Toropets facility for storing ammunition. It could withstand nuclear attack, basically. But this is what has happened a few days ago. It was one of the biggest explosions, and partly due to many weapons were stored outside. There are several ideas how it happened, how Ukraine did it, but we're not gonna speculate on it because nobody knows for sure. It sounds like it could be Ukrainian drones, which Russia claims they knocked them all down into just the pieces of the drones. So basically nowadays, the most horrible weapon is the pieces of Ukrainian drones, not just even drones themselves, but the pieces of them. So basically Russian corruption, incompetence and stupidity, and aggressive wars Russia is fighting in Ukraine. This is what brought down explosion in Toropets. And this is not exactly completely stopped Russia from continuing its aggressive war, but it will cripple it eventually if the attacks like that will gonna continue. And just few days later happened another 2 attacks we discussed today. So this is how it all happened and happening and will happen. So total, if we will talk about last 3 days, so basically last week, but practically last 3 days. So Russia totally lost about 40,000 tons of the ammunitions. Western analyst Intel Shiza explained it basically very simple. Russia is claiming that it's producing about 3 million shells per year, which is 171,000 tons. And basically, in the last week, Ukraine destroyed almost 25% of the annual Russian production of shells. So, good for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia, who is losing the war, keeps striking Ukrainian civilians. This is a post of Anton Gerashenko from September 19th, Russian strike on nursing home for the elderly in Sumy today. 221 people live there. 1 person has died, 9 more are in the hospital. Russia bombs civil children's hospitals, nursing homes, maternity hospitals. Nothing is beyond limits for them. However, Russian military aircraft are safe deep inside Russia due to the red lines, where old, young, and unborn Ukrainians die from Russian strikes. Let's look briefly on the maps what is happening. So this is the Kursk region, where Ukraine invaded Russian Federation. And since 16th of September, some things happened. And but basically, Russian counter-offensive, they're choked. It's basically useless. Russia didn't achieve much of anything, and even couple places they claim they took, they lied. There is no confirmation of that whatsoever. And Ukraine is making progress somewhere in Glushkovo district and so on. We will not be able to say much about it because Ukraine lately, again, very secretive and don't say much. Russia claims stuff, but nothing happens. So Putin isn't interested in liberating of Russian territory whatsoever. And now with destruction of several arsenals, it's gonna be hard. Less ammunition, less everything. Meanwhile, in the Russian Kursk region, in some places like Kamennoye, where there have not been the armed forces of Ukraine for a day, but all the stores, gas stations, pharmacies, and surviving residential buildings have been opened and looted. And this is a collective appeal from residents of the Kamennoye district of Kursk region to Putin. Starts with these words. The locals complain about mass looting, robbery, violence against local residents, theft of cars and agricultural equipment, and even shooting of dogs that prevented Russian armed forces soldiers from entering buildings. So Russian soldiers are a danger to Russian population. And this is what it says in Russian, that Ukrainian army haven't been there even a day. And this is exactly what I just translated to you. They really shooting dogs because they prevented some people leave their dogs chained, basically, because they knew it's gonna be looting and they thought dogs can prevent it from happening. Well, the dogs get shot. This is what Russian army does. That's what it did in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Syria, in Ukraine, and now it's doing it in Russia. Meanwhile, Russian army is bombing Russian cities with FOBs as well. A grandma from Russian Suja, it's a city now occupied by Ukraine, says that people there have Russian passports, but they're close to Ukrainians as well, and she thinks Putin abandoned them. She just waved her hand. He abandoned. He left us. In Ukraine, Russia concentrated all its forces to get Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk still not captured, not even close to it, but the battles are fierce. This is Pokrovsk, Ukraine. The authors of the photos wrote, Pokrovsk, in a few weeks, Russia turned it into a ghost town. Pokrovsk is a city that has become a refuge for those who have already lost their homes because of the war. Now they are losing it again. Russians are throwing everything in it. And according to several sources, for example, Michael Naki, who is actually really watching the Z-bloggers. Basically, it's not even pro-Ukrainian anybody. It's what Z-bloggers telling themselves that what is happening. And lots of their complaints and the facts, like, for example, Russia created another military unit called Frigate, which consists out of Navy men who's supposed to fight on the ships in the sea. Russia is scraping in the bottom of the barrel, trying to, before the election in the United States, which Putin is really hope that Trump will get elected. That's his only hope, basically. That is why they're trying to throw as many Russian people in the battle as possible and concentrate on that Pokrovsk part of the front, because they hope to achieve at least something just by sheer throwing meat into meat grinder. Many Russians dying every day, over 1,000 people a day, for months now. And So far, Pokrovsk isn't captured. They just destroying the city and blowing it completely, leveling it with artillery and so on. So, attack on those ammunition depots and arsenals will help with that, but I don't know how much. Ukraine is fighting. Ukraine is struggling. There are several things going on, which is also not everything perfect in Ukraine. They do mistakes as well. But it's a really hard and fierce battle is going on. Putin will lose the war, as I said. It will happen, but nobody knows when. And meanwhile, a lot of people are dying. But Ukraine doesn't have any other choice in defending itself, defending its survival. Not even territories. It defends, it's a fight for survival of people of Ukraine and Ukraine as a country. So Russians keep attacking, trying to get as much territory as possible in the hope that Trump will be elected. I hope they're wrong. I hope Americans knows better. But we will see about that. So this is what I have to say about the front. There is a good post of Arthur Rehi. Russia is transferring new reserves to the Pokrovsk direction. A military man explained why the enemy is in a hurry. Russia is transferring new reserves to the Pokrovsk direction and plans to take advantage of favorable conditions to storm the city. It's in a hurry because of, well, basically rainy season is coming up. So no matter how much Russia is in a hurry, they can't take Pokrovsk, I don't think. They can destroy it, and the more Russians gonna die, and unfortunately some Ukrainians will die as well. Ukraine is keep fighting and keep defending itself, and it will continue to do so. Ukrainian forces basically saved a Russian soldier abandoned by his command. He was 22 years old, and Ukrainian drone helped him out. At the same time, young Ukrainian soldier, also 22 years old, returned home after 2 years in Russian captivity. He doesn't talk, he doesn't recognize his own mother, doesn't react to anything. His comrades say he was tortured with electroshock. So this is how Russia treating prisoners of war. And by the way, remember this American lunatic, Russell Bentley? He fled to Russia to fight in Ukraine, on the Russian side. So eventually he find out what wonderful army Russia is. Russian soldiers tortured and killed him in April, and then placed him in a car and blew it up, tried to destroy the evidence. The soldiers unit until then removed his remains from the scene to further cover up the event. Before that he was not only tortured, but, how to say politely, used as a lady of the night by Russian soldiers. So I hope he enjoyed himself. So it sounds like Russia just completed the investigation into his death. I'm definitely not gonna cry for this guy. Several words about Russian economy. To whoever believing that Russian economy is doing well or great or anything like that, it's a lie. It's made up stories. And the fact is that even Elvira Nabiulina, the chief of Russian Central Bank, and her deputy, they admitting it themselves in their press conferences, which was happened recently. Even in somewhere in July, she was saying that they're gonna raise interest rates, and even if they raise it over 20%, it still wouldn't help to combat inflation. Terrible inflation. And now what happened? They raised it to 18%, and very soon after that, just right now, they raised it to 19%, and saying they're gonna raise it to 20% and maybe to 21%, which is saying that Russian economy isn't doing well or great. Basically, she herself named several key points why Russian economy isn't doing well. One of them, it's just lack of their employees, lack of the working forces, because they are at war. And Russian companies has to pay huge salaries to be able to keep at least somebody employed. They literally doesn't have people to work. And at the same thing in the front, they're using people from rocket forces who's supposed to deal with missiles and navy forces to fight on the battlefield. So all the stories that Russia can magically produce whole bunch of people on the front without damaging economy is a lie. They literally doesn't have people who gonna work in Russian economy. Technology, sanctions are working, and Nabiulina admitted it herself. Yeah, she's using fancy words, but if to strip it down, this is what she admitted to. And several other key points why Russian economy is doing well, none of them can be fixed. None of them can say, well, today is bad, but tomorrow it's going to be better. There is no hope that it will be better. Dead people, over 600,000 Russian soldiers who killed and wounded and missing in the war in Ukraine, not gonna magically stand up, wake up from the dead and go working in Russian economy or fight in Russian army again. This is not gonna happen. And this is Vladimir Milov, Russian former deputy of Minister of Energy and one of the good economists from Russia. And he was talking on the Michael Naki channel and on his own channel about this and providing that footage of Nabiullina and Zabotkin, her deputy, basically less than 2 weeks before Russian budget has to be published. And both of them, the chief of central bank Nabiullina is admitting that they don't know what is happening in Russian economy, and until the budget is published and made, they would know something, and they would have some sort of a plans of something of, which isn't gonna happen. They can't fix Russian economy. Without stopping the war, nothing gonna fix Russian economy. And even after that, Russian economy is going down. As an economist myself, who taught in several universities in Russia, I completely agree with Mr. Milov, and I understand why Nabiullina is so scared and so down, basically. She feels down because nothing she can do. She's not a magician, she can't snap her fingers and make Russian economy works. And neither can Putin. So this is what I have to say about Russian economy. According to the Moscow Times, finally, maybe, something started to click in the Russian brain. Record number of Russians call for ending war without achieving Putin's goals. Almost a half, 49% of Russian citizens, would support the withdrawal of Russian troops and peace talks with Ukraine without achieving the goals of the special military operation that Putin spoke about, according to the results of the telephone survey by the Chronicles Project and research group Extreme Scan. The base of former Wagner PMC, or so-called Wagner PMC, in Molkino burned down, and it sounded like nothing was heated or anything. It probably was a diversion, but millions of rubles of damage, and Michael Naki reported on it, and so far nobody knows why it happened. Perhaps, as Naki is thinking, that former Wagner PMC doesn't like to be called African Corps or something like that, or trying to hide something, but it seems like it's not Ukrainian strike, it's just the fire. Another important thing Michael Naki also reported about is there was a meeting of the wives of the mobilized Russian soldiers, and the sign says demobilization. This girl said, return my father, I'm waiting for him for 2 years, and so on. This is the meeting which happened in Moscow, and the women came again and trying to protest, but this time Russian authorities are way more brave, so they basically detained them and grabbed them and arrested them, as well as the journalists who tried to report on the matter. So I want to report on this too and send a clear message to Russian guys in the front. While they're fighting in Putin's war, protecting his special military operations, their wife get detained. And knowing Russian prisons and Russian guards and Russian police, it's not long time before they will get beat up, before they will be tortured, even raped, which happened to many other people, men and women alike. And I wonder where the Russian men are, who pretend to be all so brave and strong Russian men. Well, perhaps they would like to share their wives with those charming police people. So bunch of grown-up men has a gun in their hands. They're fighting in somebody else's country to attack that country, to take the people's freedom and life. Meanwhile, in their own country, their own government arresting their wives just for demanding returning their husbands home. Unfortunately, these wives missed their opportunity when they actually were a force in Russia, and they could have made change, and they could have probably bring their men back home before the so-called election, which Putin pretended to have election in Russia. Now his hands are completely untied. He doesn't want to doesn't care anymore whatsoever about any possible opinion in Russia and so on. The deal is done. So these women now can't achieve anything, and their husbands most likely will return home in the zinc caskets. So I don't know what to think about it. In some ways, I maybe a little bit feel sorry for them, but not anymore. It's over 3 years the war is like actual full-scale invasion is going on, and they choose to not to know, not to do anything. Some of them might have been drafted earlier, but many of them signed the contract because they had debts, because they thought they're gonna guard some sort of a military storage facility somewhere, and so on. But in fact, they decided it's okay to go kill people in some other countries for no reason whatsoever. And I cannot tolerate this, and in a way I feel sorry for the women, but and their children especially, but not all that much. They had a choice, and their husbands right now has a choice. They have gun in the hand, and they choose to fight for Putin, who is abusing their wives right now. So there are no men in Russia left. In my opinion, and not only in my opinion, this war is completely unfair for Ukraine. All the lies and Russian propaganda creating stories and creating opinions in our heads in the West, which isn't true. And I agree with Mr. Timothy Snyder and Anton Gerashchenko. It is truly paradoxical when Russian missiles are flying into Ukrainian cities and become kind of a normal thing. But when Ukraine wants to defend itself with missiles, it causes concern and resistance. And this is what Timothy Snyder has to say.
Is controlling the discourse. And to a large degree, the Russians have been able to control the strategic discourse, setting up for us new rules in war, which have never existed before. Like, for example, that when you invade another country, the entire war should take place on the territory of the country you've invaded. No one has ever said that before because it's completely absurd, and yet somehow it's been accepted in the United States as normal that this war should be fought on Ukrainian territory. There is no precedence for that kind of idea. Another idea that the Russians have that we've accepted is that it's normal, for example, when you and I were in Kiev, for ballistic missiles to rain down on the city where we were trying to do normal business, but it's somehow not normal for ballistic missiles from Ukraine to go into Russia. Why is that? Why is it normal for one country and not for another? It has a great deal to do with imperial thinking, which we have accepted. There's something precious, special, etc. about Russia, and somehow it's okay for Ukrainians to be victims because they always have been victims. We need to investigate, I think, that understructure of thinking, which I believe has guided our policy in the wrong way. So as far as empires are concerned, I'll return to what I said at the end, trying to respond now to your question about a victory plan. I believe the Ukrainians are right about something that they're hard pressed to convince us of, and I think what I'm saying now is consistent with the history of empire. The Russians are going to negotiate peace when they believe they are losing. And so if anyone is serious about negotiation, that person should be trying to get the Russians into a position where they think they might be losing. The Ukrainians get that, but they're having a really hard time making us understand that pairing. So when they talk about a victory plan or a peace plan, what they mean is together the West and Ukraine do enough to get Russia to a point where it might negotiate sincerely. They're not there now.
Professor Snyder is correct on that. And Putin doesn't want to negotiate, and he will not negotiate, in my opinion. And it proved it so far be true. Putin will only double down. So the only thing to stop this war and make it completely to achieve long-lasting peace, it's defeat of Russia. And Ukraine can achieve it if Ukraine will have all the necessary weapons and permissions to do so. This is what Mr. Stoltenberg has to say.
We all want this war to end. The quickest way to end the war is to lose it. But that will not bring peace. It will bring Russian occupation.
I agree with him on that. And I agree that the paradox is that the more weapons for Ukraine we are able to deliver, the more likely it is that we can reach a peace. But the only victory by Ukraine only Ukrainian victory and clearing up all its territories, it can be step for a long-lasting peace and actually stopping Putin. Or, if it would be revolt in Russia and they will get rid of Putin, stop the war, pay the reparations, and do something about it. And the only chance that Russia lose the war is to help Ukraine. And this is what we will need to focus on. As I said in the past, Putin will not stop. If he swallow Ukraine, he will go further. And this will embolden China, Iran, and everybody from so-called autocracy incorporated, which Anne Applebaum wrote in her book about. And please help Ukraine. Thank you for watching and have a great day. See you later.